going to be doing sort of an inventory of what needs to be done for the batteries to be installed. So we have to take out the batteries, find all of the existing cables, make sure we've got the right connectors, the right size cables, whether or not we need any extra cables, whether or not we're going to need to do anything to physically modify the space, things like that. We also have to draw out the details of the actual connections as we do it, and possibly label the existing cables. So, yeah.
Excited?
No, the opposite of excited. Okay, so that is our battery isolator and two of our existing batteries, and our starter battery, and our wire harness. Now this is what we're dealing with and disconnecting and then reconnecting today. So this guy is going to be, it's an isolator. It's got two positive connections. So this is the starter battery, so what it must be doing is isolating the starter motor, but it also has to be isolating something else, which is probably the bow thruster. All right, so that's that battery loose. That is also a cable wrap, 10 mil, Hunter, G, and
So here's the quick little story. Effectively, we're going to talk about power. Power comes in two forms, AC, DC, but on a boat, all of them are provided by DC. DC is direct current. Direct current comes off of batteries, and in the boat, you have batteries, when you're a liveaboard, that are charged primarily by utilizing your diesel engine to drive your alternators, and the alternators run the charging circuit. If you're living in a marina, then you can plug into shore power, and you can have that nice constant sort of household electricity that's nice and reliable, and you can have a nice little switch that you flip and your charger keeps your batteries topped up. That is not the way it works on a liveaboard. On these boats, there's basically two types of batteries. There's the domestic bank, which powers all of your normal everyday usage stuff. That's your lights, your computer chargers, your stereo if you've got one, your TV if you've got one, but other things like your water pump and your pump out if you have one of those, shower waste pump, things like that. Then you've got your starter motor, and in our case, you've got the motor that deals with the bow thruster. We don't need to talk about those. They've worked. They're still working. We don't seem to have any problems with them yet, knock wood. That's not true of our domestics. Our domestics were 4 110 amp hour batteries. Realistically, with all of the power checking that we've done and everything, we know we were getting less than 40 amp hours out of them. The actual capacity of the batteries had dropped to less than 10% of its original use. And these batteries can only go down to half their charge, so we were really only getting 20 amp hours of usable power. We were waking up every morning and having alarms going off because of there being not enough power to even drive the LED on the gas sniffer, things like that. We'd already asked you guys about solar, and in those questions there had been some mention of batteries, so we checked out these videos by Gone with the Wynns, great recommendation, and Narrowboat to the Deep North, another great recommendation. And these guys, both of these two creators, they were dealing with the same problem, essentially. Life off the grid on a boat. And they'd come to the conclusion that lithium was the right choice. And we were, well, I wouldn't say we were skeptical of the idea. It was more that we were skeptical of the price. So we watched the videos and got a lot of great ideas and a lot of good feedback. And we then followed on to videos by some of the manufacturers and stuff and got even more good ideas and a little bit more focus. As part of getting ready for solar, we did a power audit. And in that power audit, which we'll go into more detail in another video, we measured everything we could. And we'd found that we had a real world need of between 80 and 100 amp hours a day, which meant that a bank that could provide 200 to 220 amp hours was probably sufficient for our usage with the amount of traveling we're likely to do, the number of times we're hoping to be cruising even during the winter, the amount of solar that we're getting. This should be enough. Might not be, but should be. And based on that, we knew sort of what it was we were going to have to invest in terms of capacity. And we know how many years we think we want to be on the boat. So that is capacity and number of cycles and lifespan. So we started doing our research. I wanted to check out all the cheaper options, so I looked at the lead acid flooded batteries, I looked at the sealed batteries. These are basically 1970s style truck batteries. There's been small improvements, but not much. I looked at absorbed glass mat, very popular, for many, many years. This is still really a lead acid battery, but instead of it being liquid fluid moving around, there's a sort of a fiberglass mat impregnated with acid, and the batteries can tilt and be put into different positions, and they've got better discharge characteristics and stuff. The price is not exactly linear with lead acid. Like you don't get as much bang for the buck as I sort of hoped. So I kept looking. There's gel batteries, which use a gelatinized acid. Same characteristics with being able to turn the battery and stuff. A little bit better even for discharge and stuff. A little bit more life. Again, not exactly linear on price. Then there's the newest generation, which is the gel tubular, where the actual lead cells are round, and that means more surface area because there's both the inside and outside of the tube. With regular lead acid batteries, I can use my existing charger setup, my simple, stupid alternator. Don't need to add anything like an adverc or any complicated charging system onto the alternator. And that saves me having to physically disassemble and modify the alternators and or get somebody else to do that and pay for an installation. And that thing is necessary if I'm getting any of the higher quality lead batteries. If I'm going for the gel tubular, for instance, I'm going to have the added expense of the batteries plus the added expense of this charger upgrade. This gets to start getting into pricey territory. And it's still not as pricey as the lithiums, but it is enough that you're starting to look at a serious chunk of the cost of a lithium setup. So, okay, let's look at the realities of the lithium setup. What's it actually going to cost us? Well, it turns out that I can provide those 200 amp hours with just 2 batteries. And over the projected life of what we want to be on the boat, I'm only going to need 1 set of those batteries. The lithiums are sort of a 2,000 pound price range. I'm getting to like somewhere between 1,200 and 1,500 pounds over time for the lead acid. The initial cost is much lower, but by the time I've kind of done all the touching and pulling it out and everything, and my time, and it's not hugely cheaper. Now, if I go to the lead acids that are going to get me similar lifespan, or at least sufficient lifespan, now I'm actually spending almost the same amount for the batteries, because I still will probably need to change them out at least once, and I'm definitely going to hit that added charging circuit. So that comes out to basically being a wash. The lithiums are the same price now, and the lithiums are lower complexity because I can basically drop them into my existing circuitry. I don't need to change out the alternator. I don't need to do anything for the cabling other than basically just, getting the right connectors. It's going to be a smaller number of batteries, so I can remove some of my existing system. It's going to be a lower amount of weight by a long shot than my existing system, which means I might have to change ballast around a little bit. They're kind of the perfect battery for a live aboard life. Just the characteristics of these things. They've got a better discharge cycle in that they give up more power more readily, and they don't mind doing it. Once you get past 50%, you can just keep drawing power from it. You can get a better charge cycle. You can put more power into it faster. It can take more off your alternator in a short amount of time. So you get up to 100% quicker than you do with having to do a 3-layer float charge and a balancing charge and everything on a lead acid. Now, the batteries are more expensive, but they're more expensive because they've got some of that charge controller circuitry built into them, which, of course, the lead acid batteries, even the best ones, are just dumb batteries. They got no circuitry, no nothing doing anything for you, so that's why you have to have that additional system. Everything about it starts to make sense when you realize that you're treating the batteries the way they want to be treated, which is exactly the opposite of lead. When you're using lead acid batteries in a liveaboard system where you are randomly putting in charge at different points, solar going in, yeah, it is topping things up, but that's entirely fluctuating based on the sun. These are batteries which, in their most ideal circumstance, would never be anything but just discharge and then immediately recharge it. Always trying to keep it up at its float voltage. Always be trickle charging it. This would give you its longest potential lifespan. That's not true of lithiums. As long as you don't discharge them completely and leave them flat for a long amount of time, you get basically perfect performance out of them. At least on paper. Hopefully this is all true in reality. Then we had to install them. Installing them, it turns out, is not as simple as we'd hoped, but that wasn't because of the batteries. That was because of our system. That was because when we got back there and started pulling everything apart, we had a ridiculously complicated mess of spaghetti that had never been organized. There wasn't any form of, logic to it. Stuff just went willy-nilly across the inside of the engine bay. I don't physically fit in the engine bay. Once we got the battery box out for the extra 2 batteries and got all the batteries out, got the starter battery out, and started pulling out the box to be able to just sort of install all of the stuff we need to get in there, the only person who could reach in was Jo. So she spent most of the last day and a half in the engine bay getting it all assembled while I'm sitting up there pointing at different cables saying, make sure you connect that, and putting a whole bunch of little magnet things down to pick up the little bits of steel we dropped down into the engine bay a long time. So it's been a crazy, fun couple of days. There's been rain constantly coming and going, so we had to keep covering and uncovering, and every time we covered, we had less light, and every time we had less light, we had to use up batteries, which would eventually die, and we didn't have any means of charging those batteries, which is why we don't have any footage. End of the day, we got our 2 batteries installed. And it would have been easier if our system had already been somewhat organized. It would have been easier if we'd had a actual wiring diagram which represented our boat. When we purchased this boat, it came with a wiring diagram that represented the typical installation by the manufacturer, and it turns out the typical installation by the manufacturer has no bearing whatsoever on the actual installation by the manufacturer. The existing wiring had been done in a hurry by somebody who didn't care, with the cheapest parts available to them, and they didn't give any thought to what would have to happen if somebody ever had to service this. So that's what got in the way, and that's what cost us a day and a half. If we'd just been pulling it out of a system that had been cared for and putting new batteries in, it would have just been a couple of terminal changes, because the lithiums take a slightly different style terminal than is common on lead acid batteries. Overall, I think that it's a totally worthwhile thing to do. We'll find out in the long run if it gives us the performance we really hope it will. We did install a battery monitor at the same time, and that battery monitor has been extremely invaluable in just the last 12 hours in showing us that our power audit was correct. We are drawing in our normal usage exactly what we thought we would be. We know that our measurements on all of our devices are accurate. It's even helped us identify the couple of lights I hadn't switched out to an LED because I just hadn't realized that I hadn't switched them out to an LED. It's going to make a world of difference, and we're really looking forward to actually, being able to use our system. And hopefully that means we will pretty quickly be able to actually charge up our cameras and get you guys some new footage. Some of which will involve George, I'm sure. and more bloopers. Lord knows I tried to record this like 7 times so far today. So, that's it. Thank you very much. Links in the description thingamajig below regarding the videos that we watched where we got some good advice and everything, in case anybody else hasn't found them. And, yeah. If you're thinking about batteries and you're in need of replacing them, definitely consider the lithium idea. If you can wait a year, probably going to find that the price is even better. Thank you very much. Hope that's helpful. Let me know if you got any questions. Let me know if I missed anything. Too large of a wrench. Too large of a wrench. Possibly just the right size of a wrench. Wrong size of a wrench. That's a 10, that's a 12. Well, that's problematic because if we jump from...
You need an 11 basically.
Ah, no, it's a 12. Good. Not good. Not at all good.